today. We need to be over here in Bag End. I have Matt and Sid with me. They're not visible just yet. They got their rings on, but you can hear them.
Hello, everybody.
Hey guys.
And I'm going to set up the promos and everything that we need to do real quick once I get the URL for the YouTube stream. Hey, Sid, you know how, like, there was a time that Chris wanted to watch the stream and she needed a link, and I sent you a link, and you said something like, "Oh, but that's, you still have to click on something extra after that." And it's because
Yeah.
it's weird the way that YouTube works. It actually that link is different every time. It generates as soon as you go live.
Ah,
So
got
yeah,
it.
so that's why I could never give it like the exact link ahead of time. But the one that I gave you, that works.
Yeah, we know how to navigate it now.
Yeah. Oh, I'm on the wrong thing, aren't I? Here we are. Okay. I couldn't see the chat. Now I can see the chat. And I can see the Dylan's there. How's it going? Says, greetings, John. I've had a day straight from the pits of Angband. That sounds not ideal. That sounds very not ideal. All right, let me get the promotional stuff out there real quick, and then we'll fully address chat and everything.
I'm down with the nameless things under Mordor.
I feel like for the past like 2-3 months, I've been traveling through the Emyn Muil, so.
I was kind of thinking of you as trapped in Isengard after the Ents broke down all the machinery and flooded it.
All right, I'm just promoting, and then I'll be able to give you everybody my full attention. And now I know that a while back I had advertised that in December we were going to do a special episode that would have something to do with the films, but because of all the delays that we've had and everything. Hey there, Wano, how's it going? No, that's not just a rumor, Wano. They are indeed making a Gala movie. It's coming out, I want to say next year. But yeah, that is real. That is happening. Okay, let me just. All right, I'm just gonna pop over to the. I just want to make sure everything's lined up properly before I. Okay, yeah, everything's lined up properly. So that is real. They are actually doing that. Now I just got to make it so I could see the chats on my screen here. Your day is always better when it's a stream day, especially a council day, is what my moderator Dylan says, and it's really nice to hear that, of course. So yeah, for the special December stream, it's actually going to wind up being a special January stream because I've been playing catch up with everything and trying to get back into the groove of running the channel and catching up on old questions and such. So I didn't get the chance to really reach out to Matt and Sid and have them prepare and everything. So that's going to be January. But I will do, and I mentioned this to Sid. Matt hasn't heard of it yet, but I am going to do a special Christmas Day stream. Because Christmas Day turns out to be on a Thursday. And hey, Moogle, where I'll be reading the Letters from Father Christmas by J.R.R. Tolkien, which is a Christmas book where he wrote letters from what we would call Santa Claus to his children, sort of explaining why they couldn't get the exact present that they wanted usually. It was always something like, the elves broke it, or the polar bear got it and ate it, or something like that. Always some excuse why they couldn't get exactly what they wanted. But okay. All right. I think the Twitch chat will work just like that. As long as I don't mess with anything, I think we're good. As long as it doesn't start lagging out on me. What now? Actually, since we're sitting here, Matt and Sid, before we start the show, what do you guys think about this like Gala movie? Like, are we cautiously optimistic, or are we thinking this is going to be terrible?
This is the first time I've heard about it.
Oh, okay.
There is an amazing already existing, like from about the time of the Lord of the Rings 2001 coming out.
Oh, the fan film.
The fanfic
Yeah.
is one of the best things I've seen. With the right hand at the helm, it's an easy.
It's a layup, isn't
movie
it?
story.
Yeah. Well, the right hand.
Let me who's doing it.
Let me give you the information. It is being written and directed by Andy Serkis.
Oh, I've liked everything he's done.
Yeah, me
especially
too.
with Gollum. But he first of all he utterly gets Gollum, not only as an actor, but person to person, and he's dedicated to Tolkien. So that is very promising.
And I know we
know that this is the first thing I've said about that since the three movies.
Yeah, since the Return of the King came out, right?
Since the Return of the King came out, literally, and you guys know that
because I know you haven't even watched like The Hobbit or anything. So
I literally got nauseous and had to run to the bathroom every time I watched the trailers for it.
Because they filmed it in a rather unusual way. It was 48 frames per second. A lot of people got motion sickness just from scenes of just Bilbo and Gandalf talking. You would feel queasy because of the strange.
I felt that, but there were just such awful absurdities.
Yeah, I felt the first one had some potential, but man, they went off the rails with that. They really went far off the rails with that, and that was really Warner Brothers' fault there for demanding a trilogy out of such a short novel. But anyway,
it was also Jackson's willingness to give up his, if he
didn't want to do it.
Jackson himself had done right. If he had wanted to do it and done it, that would have worked. But he picked the wrong replacement.
Well, what's interesting. I'm going to switch to over here. I mean, we're still just gabbing, but I'm sure you guys want to actually see Matt and Sid. And what's interesting is that in the original treatment that he had, he always wanted to make 3 films, one about The Hobbit and 2 about The Lord of the Rings. And it was when he discovered that he didn't actually have the rights to The Hobbit. He thought he did, and he didn't. And he started pitching The Lord of the Rings as a duology. And all these film companies are telling him, no, it has to be one film. Until he came across, New Line Cinema. They said 2. Why don't you do 3? It's 3 books, And that was where they struck gold. But, then by the time The Hobbit rolls around, it's Warner Brothers now. And they said, we want another trilogy. We want another, $5 billion. And they got it. That's the sad part. But I think, it's been a while since we've had a movie project that's live action. They did the Rohan cartoon film, which was pretty good, but you could tell that it was something that they made that to hold off because the Gollum movie got so delayed. And my understanding was that delay had everything to do with Andy Serkis wanting the script to be perfect. And actually, might have
been a casting problem. Not enough able to find enough real orcs.
Well, yeah. Apparently, the other news that I can give you, since you're really just hearing about this now, is that Mr. Ian McKellen said the script is really good. So,
cool.
He doesn't strike me as the kind of person to just blow smoke. I mean, he is like 90-somewhat years old, and I think if it was bad, he would probably say it was bad at this point.
Or just not say anything at all.
Exactly. He would just. So I remember, like when he was approached to be Gandalf again for this film, because if you know The Hunt for Gollum, it's primarily a Gandalf and Aragorn tale. He said, "You'd better hurry. I'd like to be in this movie before I die." He is a quite elderly gentleman. Hey, WT, how's it going? Actually, speaking of these old actors and sort of the weird necromancy that Hollywood can do at times, I watched a film a week or two ago, the latest Alien film, Alien Romulus. And despite the fact that he's been dead for a few years, it featured a certain Mr. Ian Holm, who we know he had played Bilbo in The Lord of the Rings, and he also played Frodo in the BBC radio adaptation as well. And they used some technology to have a young Ian Holm be in this movie, playing a robot. And it was actually like kind of a little bit convincing, which is scary as heck. But my understanding is that they didn't use AI, which is probably why it was pretty good. They used some digital effects and some makeup on a real actor. But it was nice to see him again, though. And apparently his wife had approved of the whole thing. Christopher Lee, they had to piece together a bunch of words from different things that he had said to have him speak a line in the Rohan movie. But anyway, guys, welcome to the Council of Tolkien. Let's go around the room and introduce ourselves first. For anybody who might be joining us for the first time, whether you're watching us live through Twitch or through YouTube, or if you're watching us later on YouTube, we meet every month to discuss this, and we have, what is it, Matt, 130 years of Tolkien knowledge between us?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
133.
133. One day it's going to be one gross.
It goes up by 3 every year, John.
That is true. So it actually won't be one gross because that's not divisible by 3. But
Well, we can say
no,
it
wait,
is.
no,
We can just say
it is. Actually, 144 is divisible by 3. Okay.
Yeah, but 133 is not. Anyway, when we get there, we'll just have a really gross here.
Yeah, we'll do. Hey there, Chris. How's it going? Chris is in the chat. We'll do like Bilbo's birthday party here, where we tell everybody what we really think of them, and then disappear in a flash. But let's introduce ourselves, Matt. I'm going to start with you since you're on the left, and why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself real quick? Yeah, I know.
Matt Richard. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm laughing at something in chat. Go ahead.
I'm Matt Richardson, and I go by the handle of Lore Master on Quora, where I have my own space so that I share with the 9, and the gentleman here to my right here, John Sierra and Sid Kemp, are part of that group, the 9. They are LM2 and LM3, and we go by these names because it's kind of fun. So, but we also have a website out there, loremaster.com, and is where the 9 Lore Masters have a site that we're developing. There's articles there now, but we're going to be using that going forward. So, welcome to the show, and I hope you enjoy it.
And of course, you guys probably know me, but I'll introduce myself anyway. I'm John Sierra, and I also write on Quora, and I've been running this YouTube channel for like 2.5 years, and I've been studying the works of J.R.R. Tolkien since the late 80s, and with specialty in language. That's my favorite part of it, and yeah. And I'm going to kick it over to Sid. Sid, go ahead and introduce yourself real quick.
Hi, I'm Sid Kemp. I've been reading and writing about Tolkien for well over 50 years. My focus is on him and the nature of his genius. From what places does he write that he was able to create worlds of such depth and characters and questions of such amazing meaning and value. You can find me as Sid Kemp on Quora, where I have 11,000 answers, about half of them about Tolkien, and on AO3, which is archive of our own from my Tolkien fanfic. And actually, those are really the 2 main places I am, but I'm always Sid Kemp. Find me.
Okay. And, what you were talking about your specialty, this sort of like goes perfectly into what you're going to talk about today, actually. And since I wanted to go last, and you were saying that you might want to go first, so why don't we actually? I'm going to do the timer a little different. I have it on my phone. That way, I don't accidentally lose it behind another window. So I'm going to set you a 2-minute timer here for you to introduce the first half-hour segment. And since I see that you're getting ready, I'll explain the way the show works to anybody who might be seeing it for the first time. Is that each of us will lead off a half-hour segment. We don't talk for a half hour, but we come up with a discussion, and then the three of us will talk about that discussion for half hour. So, Sid, go ahead. You have a 2-minute intro here to tell us what we're going to be talking about. Go ahead.
I'd like all of us, including the users online through the chat, to join the discussion. This is my third segment on Eru, the creator, and the hobbits, and how they destroyed the ring, how Eru managed all of that. And in this one, I'm going to talk about how Tolkien intended us to use what he did as a writer to address creative and worrisome concerns about our Creator. Now, I am not a Christian more than I'm anything else, and you might think I'm a Catholic from the way I write and think about this. I think Catholic theology is a good challenge to take on in my spare time. Tolkien empowered readers to think about God and Christian ethical dilemmas for themselves. Christian theology creates many paradoxes that are real, difficult, and painful. The core is, if God is loving, good, and all-powerful, how come the world is such a mess? There are other smaller issues as well, and we can have fun with them. Most people don't think how to ask these questions themselves. We are either afraid to do theology or to think wrong things about God. But we freely develop our own ideas about characters in books all the time. Tolkien made Eru Ilúvatar, the one creator of the world, an explicit stand-in for the Judeo-Christian creator of the world, a character in his novels. In his letters, we see he even had his coroner checked for theological orthodoxy by a Jesuit priest. But so we can look at Eru as a character in the novels and ask, why does he do things the way he does? Then whether we're a Christian or not, we can get a better understanding of the Jewish Christian creator God. I will address 3 topics later on in this half hour. Does God grow, change, and learn? Does God give tasks to people who are sure to fail? And does God send husbands and fathers to death in war?
Okay.
Because those are all things that became very, very clear. We're done.
Okay.
I'm ready for everyone to jump in.
All right. I'm setting the half-hour timer now. So it's interesting that you mentioned this because I wrote a treatment of the Tolkien's creation myth once on Quora. Basically, just rewriting the Ainulindala in my own words so that people could understand it from a lay perspective, because the Silmarillion is a challenging read and the Ainulindala is probably the most challenging part of the book to digest for many people, to the point where Tolkien's own website says maybe skip that part if you're having a hard time and come back to it later. So I laid it all out, and somebody left me a comment that said, it's almost like Tolkien was trying to improve upon the basic Judeo-Christian, or I should actually say Abrahamic creation myth, and maybe work through some things that he had issues with. And you said something to me earlier, Sid, in your sort of practice run that you didn't put into that 2-minute intro, so I'll bring it up, is that it's a safe way to sort of critique the concept of an omnipotent and omniscient creator and the feelings that we get about, hey, how come the world is so terrible if that's true, by saying, well, we're really talking about Ilúvatar, Eru Ilúvatar, and of course we have the lightning rod that is Melkor, Tolkien's satanic figure, but of course people are going to say, and I think all 3 of us can attest to the fact that we've had this question asked many times, well, didn't Eru create Melkor? Does Melkor really have free will? Is he really making his own decisions? And if he can't win, which is what God says to him in the beginning, it's one of the first lines spoken, is you can't win, basically. Why is he allowing him to run rampant and cause so much destruction and terrible things to happen to innocents that live in the planet Arda, in Middle Earth, in the Undying Lands? Why is there so much suffering required to get to that wonderful goal at the end? And these are the hard questions that we can ask about, our own lives. Why do bad things happen to good people, and why do good things happen to bad people? And why is that a pattern that has happened since the Ainu Lindala, or since Genesis, or since the Big Bang, or whatever you believe in? It's always something that's happened.
One piece of that Tolkien answered really clearly is, why does it take so long to fix everything? And John, you're in charge. If you want me to say more on that, I will. If you want to keep it open to other people,
I just want to. I'm going to add one more thing, and then we want to hear from Matt as well, especially since Matt is Catholic and probably has some good input here. But I was asked the question of, like, well, is somebody like Aula responsible for the actions of Feanor and for Saruman and for Sauron, because they were all his students? And I said, no, he's not at all, not any more than a teacher would be responsible for something you do later on in your life. Just because they taught you shop doesn't mean that, you kill somebody with a hammer 30 years later, that's his fault. It doesn't work like that. But you mentioned about how things take time, and I was bringing up also Eyanwa and Sauron, and this was in a different but related article where I said, and people always say, why didn't Eyanwa, who had Sauron kneeling before him, take custody of him and bring him to the Undying Lands to face judgment? Because that would have, there would have been so much bad things that wouldn't have happened, so much suffering would be nullified by that. And of course, the answer is we wouldn't have the Lord of the Rings, but from a spiritual standpoint, Sauron is coming before Eyanwe, and hello there, Deborah, and saying, I repent, please pardon me. And Eyanwe is saying, you have to go through the proper channels. You have to travel to the Undying Lands and stand before Manwë and ask him for pardon, because I don't have that authority. And it has to be willing. It has to be something that he really, really wants to do. And he doesn't do it, which proves that he didn't really want it enough. He was feeling badly, but he wasn't fully repentant. It's the same thing that we see with Gandalf and Saruman. He doesn't lock him in his tower until after he gives him a shot at coming back into the light. And then when they meet on the road in Dunlin, both him and Galadriel give Saruman another chance, even after all the terrible things, another chance at coming back into the light. And then even Frodo gives him another chance to come back into the light. And of course he rejects all of that, just like Sauron rejected it. Gandalf even said, have Sauron come forth and surrender himself. Of course he didn't do that.
That was completely genuine. It's...
Hi, Alice.
Those who are clear on
Tommy.
that, reread the dialogue between the Mouth of Sauron and Gandalf and Aragorn at the Black Gate. What if the key theological moment of the entire novel was Gandalf having the chance to literally say, walk out and you're free? And it was true. That is what it means to have enough pity and mercy to let every soul have a chance to the very bitter end to repent. And that's why everything has to pile up until the last minute, which is called eucatastrophe.
And it has
a concept Tolkien created.
It has to be willing. It can't be coerced or forced in any way, because then it's not true repentance. If Saruman was dragged out and forced to kneel and repent, then it's not really what he wants to do, and it wouldn't be something that really counts in the eyes of Manwë or Iluvatar or anybody else who has any authority to give out these sort of pardons. Matt, we haven't heard from you, and I'm very much wanting to right now.
Well, there's a couple of reasons why this is really near and dear to me. I'm Catholic, but I'm also a retired philosophy professor and taught world religions. So this is a really good question, and I want to address the last one I just heard real quick, and that is a concept in which basically is stated that this way: God doesn't care how or when you come to him. It doesn't matter if you believe him by the shroud of the Turin or by faith only, or God only cares about the relationship you have with him at the time that you're passing, and that you've genuinely asked for forgiveness, or you've made yourself right with that restored relationship. So, and that leads me into the second point, which is the difference between Chronos and Kairos time. Chronos time is clock time. What's interesting about the projection of the human view of God is that we're very human-centric, anthropocentric, if you want to call it that, about our view about what God is or what he looks like. And of course, all of this is all completely arrogant. What God is spirit, and what he wants is relationship with our spirit. He knows that we're down here for a short period of time, that this rock that's spinning around the sun is a dangerous place. Dangerous things happen here. Sharks are hungry. Volcanoes erupt. Blah, blah, blah. There's all kinds of things, plague and pestilence and all this kind of thing. And what he sees, not what we see, but what he sees is the spirit nature of everybody. And he is wanting that to be preserved. Our interest in superimposing our values, our flawed human worldly values, on ourselves, and thereby our relationship with God, and thereby how God thinks, is the huge falsehood of it all. The Chronos aspect is that we have gauged everything in what's called sequential time. We've gauged this as gauged time by the sun. We've picked the star, our sun, the star, how many days it takes to revolve. Those are days, minutes, all these things. This is not how God sees time passage. It's not how the universe or the cosmos sees time passage. It's not how Astrosaurians see time passage. It's time passage is simply sequential. In other words, there's this, then there's that, then there's this, and there's no keeping of time the way that we think we keep time. That's not how it happens. And therefore, the question that Sid brings up earlier, which is, this long passage of time, that's long to us, but there is no counting of time in the actual spiritual world, or the world of the world that has been made, and that relates to what was made in this world by Eru.
Okay, Matt, let me just reply to some of that, because it's all really, really important and very correct. Tolkien knew all of that and agreed with everything that you said, because the dwelling of Eru is called the Timeless Halls. It's one of the first things we learn, that when he creates the concept of time by creating the concept of music, and that's why music is what created the world, because a song has a beginning, and it has a middle, and it has an end. And for those of you...
And a beat.
Yes, and a beat and a rhythm and a meter and everything, and harmonies and melodies, and sometimes there's one guy in the corner doing a different thing that doesn't make sense, and it sort of screws the whole thing up, which is what happened. But to Iluvatar's perspective, it's all already happened, and he had the concert. It already happened for him. He knows how it ends. But his children, and I don't mean the elves and the men, the literal, but his first children, the angels, the holy ones, they don't really understand what they've done. And the whole concept of Ea and Arda, to me, has always been about, you've made the music, now experience it. And they go and they dwell in the world, not all of them, but the key players They go and they dwell in the world and they experience it. And these angels are experiencing time. And it actually takes them a long time to figure out what time is and how it works and how things change. And they're like children themselves. Even the Valar are like children taking their first steps. And they're living apart from their parents, and they don't know what's going on, and they have to figure out everything their own. And they said, you know what? I'm going to make the world, and you guys are going to shape it. And of course, we have that one moment in the Second Age where it's like they call on him, and it's like, okay, you called on me. I'm going to do something terrible. I'll fix your mess this one time, but you really expected to handle this from now on. And, basically what I'm getting at is even the difference between mortals and elves, they think of time as completely different things. And I think that's why the Ainur made this huge mistake of identifying very strongly with the elves and trying to separate them and put them in their own land where nothing dies, because they were very bothered by the concept of death for varying reasons, that there would be people that would arise and then they weren't going to be there anymore, and they were going to go someplace and they couldn't follow them no matter what. They were stuck. And it was like, you guys are going to sit here and you're going to play this whole thing out until the end, and you're going to see that the end is going to be wonderful no matter what that Melkor guy does. I'm going to kick it over to Sid now.
Since the core of this half hour is understanding Eru, I want
Hi,
to give
Laurel.
everybody... What?
I was saying hi to Laurel, so go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was saying I want to give everybody a simple picture of what John just said. Eru begins as a musical composer hiring, that is creating and training his angelic musicians, the Ainur, which are the Valar and the Maiar, the angelic beings, to play music and to sing. And then they produce an amazing song, the Ainu, Song of the Ainur, Ainu Lindale. And he pulls the orchestra together, he writes the score, he conducts the music, and when things go badly, he says, enough. But then he does, imagine Shakespeare starting as a musician and moving on to be a playwright. He creates the opera. And the opera plays out over and over, age after age, bringing the music into people, angels and elves and human beings and dwarves and all the other sorts on the earth, acting out the play in endless variations, each age being a variation, and each age ending as the song ends, in a huge clash that gives everybody a chance to see what the bleep has been going on all along and choose sides.
Now, I'd like to bring the chat into it, Sid, if you don't mind, because we have some
Please,
interesting things here. Yeah. So Tommy Does Chile had said that we can never see the whole picture, and perhaps all the struggles of the peoples of Middle-earth go through is needed in the afterlife when the world is remade. And of course, Tolkien had this idea of there being an Arda unmarred, a second world created without evil, and that with our voices would be a part of that as well. Us and the elves and the dwarves and the hobbits and everybody. Matt, you look like you have something to say to that.
Yeah, I do. It's related to the idea of true evil. Tolkien says there is no true evil in his world, yet he makes Melkor. So how is that possible philosophically or religiously? Well, this is how it's possible. And what's really going on. And this is the proof of it. Melkor is not made evil.
Nothing is. Just like Elrond said, nothing's made evil.
That's why true evil doesn't exist, because evil doesn't beget itself in creation. God or Eru made everything and gave everybody free will, including the Ainur, the Valar especially. Okay, so they're able to choose what they want to do, and by that choice they are evil, but they are not inherently made evil. That's why what Tolkien is saying is consistent. It doesn't actually exist in its pure, true form, other than what Melkor and all of us make of ourselves by each one of our free choice decisions.
What we make ourselves is empty. If you read the poetry of
Yeah.
Morgoth and Sauron carefully, and this is one of two Catholic theological views, the opposite of love could be hatred, but the deeper opposite of love for Tolkien and myself is not love, nothing,
Apathy.
emptiness.
Right. Now,
Or
why does it?
more importantly, separation from the flame eternal that is life itself.
Moving on to Deborah. Deborah here said, some say that Middle-earth and creation of the world kind of depended on the chaos created by Melkor. What if he didn't revolt? How might his non-revolt have affected the world? And my thought has always been that if he had just sung Alice or Mogul, could you ban that guy, please? Just sung along with everybody else, and there was no issues, and the concert went off exactly, perfectly, I don't think he would have created the world. I think he created the world because there was an issue, and it was like, here, look at what you've done now.
Well, let me go one further than that, because this is the other part of the balance of what I was going to say. That's perfect. The issue is that the Valar are needed for creation.
Thank you, Alice.
And in order to do that, they're given free will. In order to facilitate the theory of gradation, or the concept of gradation. In other words, there's variation built into the music. You cannot have true free will and true creation unless you actually give it away. Eru cannot be the only maker. This is what Tolkien is saying here. He's saying that in order to give free will, there has to be the variation degrees from order to chaos on both ends of the spectrum. And that the players that are part of making this all have free choice. And in the interplay between all of that, you have variation and creation of choices. Some of that's going to be chaotic. Some of that's going to be healing the chaos. Now, why exactly doesn't evil or Melkor actually want to win control over everything? Well, it's because evil knows that its end game is the destruction and the return of nihilism to everything that they destroyed. They don't want to be in power. They want to actually have something exist, healed, sustainable, ongoing, so that it can continue to be corrupted and marred. They don't want to actually have the whole polarity of the cosmos changed to chaos and darkness and destruction, where nothing grows and everything's corrupted. If you take them to the nth degree,
they feel like they do, but they don't really want it.
They want to do it, but if you actually gave them the baton, the magic baton, the really smart evil guys, which they are, they'll look at that and go, wait a minute, if I do this, it's all going to be gone, because we would actually change the polarity of every single thing that God made in sustainability and creativity. And this is why they allow it to be, so it can go on and heal and then mar it again. But they are not the power order givers to the cosmos, and never will be, because the good side, the creative side of this, is the order givers, the sustainability aspect of the paradigm balance between the two sides.
Now this brings us, oh, I'm sorry, Matt, but this brings us back to a question that Sid had raised at the very beginning of this that we haven't touched upon, which is, does Eru set up certain people to fail? And the answer is unequivocally no. And the perfect example of this is Feanor. He had everything. He had the greatest mind. He was the most beautiful elf, beloved by all. He was a genius. He could create things that were wonderful, things that were beautiful, things that were useful. And he himself brought himself to ruin because of he listened to Melkor. Nobody told him, hey, go talk to Melkor. Melkor got in his head and twisted his thoughts. And we all have flaws. Nobody's perfect. Even Feanor at the beginning wasn't perfect. Just like you're not born evil, you're not born perfect either. Everybody has personality flaws. And what Melkor does is he can tell you he could tell what your flaw is, and he can exploit it. He did it with Sauron and Sauron's fixation on chaos and order, which you just brought up. And with Feanor, he brought out his insecurities about the fact that his parents were no longer together. His father had remarried. He has a half-brother now that everybody likes, and he's really afraid that everybody's going to like his half-brother more than him, which is ridiculous because even his half-brother likes him, even though he's such a jerk to him. Feanor was the greatest child of Iluvatar ever created, and he wound up becoming a mass murderer. He wasn't set up that way. He wasn't created to be a mass murderer, because the Valar wept more for the fact that he had gone bad more than they wept for the trees. And that says a lot.
There are two themes here that recur over and over and over. Being the most powerful in any category is extraordinarily dangerous. Mm-hmm. Melkor was the most powerful of all the Valar and fell to be Morgoth. Sauron was the most powerful. Maiar, maybe absolutely by some accounts, and certainly under Aule.
Just in magic, he was.
Yeah, and also among Aule's trainees. Aule, and the other piece is people who make things and get attached to things.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut out. I just want to say Saruman fits into what you said as well.
Exactly, and that's where Saruman, Sauron and Saruman both, as great makers under Aule, are at incredible risk. And Saruman, again, as the greatest of the wizards, the White Wizard, initially, is at greatest risk. So these are things to watch out for. If you're the best at anything you do, be careful of pride. If you make objects that are powerful and start to think, I made this, as opposed to what's the option? The option is what Tolkien called sub-creation. We have freedom and will in many ways. Freedom to create whatever we want, will to do what we will do, but there's one choice in that, which is disastrous. If what we do is a sub-creation, is a tune in harmony with all music, all the creator's music, we're cool. It can be really weird and strange, like talking stony little men like Aule made, mistake but corrected. Can be utterly amazing and beautiful, like the stars of
Varda.
Arda.
Varda.
No, I was thinking Varda.
Varda.
Or every natural living creature of Yavanna. Mm-hmm. But as long as it plays a tone in harmony, a theme in harmony with the theme of the Ainu Lindale, you are connected to the creative life of the world, the eternal flame, and all is good. And I actually disagree with something John said earlier. I'm not saying I'm right and he's wrong, but in my view, I do believe that Eru would have made the world even if Morgoth had
not sang discordant themes.
Not fallen. Yeah, because he wanted to see what we would do. That's why he created every Ainu to play their own music as free musicians.
He was fully expecting there was going to be free will and choice.
Yeah, he didn't. Whether he expected the fall or not, my humorous, simple way to say it is, he gave us freedom because he wants us to be free. He gave us will so we could do things, and we put it together into free will, which is not quite what he thought about.
Well, you even see it in the fact of the way that the Ainu Lindala is played out, because he leads the themes. He's essentially the conductor in this. He hums a little tune for them and then sits back and listens. And he's absolutely allowing improvisation, and he's listening to every single note that every single one of them said. And that when Yavanna, through Manwe, came to him with this issue of, hey, I'm worried about the trees that I created. Won't anybody just appreciate them for what they are instead of what use they could be? Are they just going to be there to be chopped down and made into wood? Won't there be something to protect them? And God's answer was, I heard you the first time. Don't worry about it. I got you covered. Because she had already thought of the Ents during the Ainu Lindala, and he created the Ents out of her thought. What Melkor did was interesting, because it wasn't so much improv. It was, you know what? This isn't my scene. I'm going to start a completely different genre of music, and I'm going to try to drown everybody else out and become the conductor.
Yeah. I want to talk real quick about free will and fate. I want to talk real quick about free will.
Go ahead. We still have 4 minutes left, so go ahead.
It's a segment to what you guys are saying. So free will, Melkor is allowed free will. We're all allowed free will. And fate is not as complicated and yet complicated as we make it out to be. There's only... We think that means fate. There's all these different variations of things and what we do every single day and what happens to my car and all these things that are in our own world. In the end, there's maybe only 3 basic fates that Eru or God actually cares about, or those are the fates. Which way you're going to choose? You're going to choose the middle gray area, evil. In other words, you can have free will and you can have fate, because your fate is known based on the fact that is a spiritual being, and God's spiritual, Eru is spiritual. That's how he's going to judge. So the Silmarillion says everyone's going to be judged. Which one of those are you? Those are your fates. Those are the only spiritual fates that make any difference to God. But we think of the fate as that we've got all these different intricacies and details, and how can God know all that when actually it's actually not that complicated. In fact, it's complicated, but not complicated. But free will allows the variation in the song to include chaos elements. When this first happened in Ea, was Eru surprised? No. He was, there's Melkor doing his thing.
He almost praised him after he said, mighty are the Ainur, and mightiest among them is Melkor. He was almost like, yeah, nice try.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you're not going to take over you don't have enough power to take it over. You're not the author of it. And even if I gave you the power, you wouldn't want it, because give yourself 5 seconds to think about it and you destroy everything. You had nothing left to mar and destroy, because the end game of what you do is death and destruction, and the forest fire burns itself out to the point where there's no forest left. That's not what you want.
I do have something.
I'm not going to let it happen.
I do have something to say, but Sid has had his hand up, so go ahead, Sid.
Well, I know we're just about the end of time. Just make sure I have a minute or two at the end if you want to go first.
Okay. Yeah, well, we got 2 minutes, so I'll just real quick. One of the most important and very often just glossed over statements made about morality in the Silmarillion actually comes from Namo Mandos, and it's like right after the trees were destroyed, the 2 trees, and everybody's sort of weeping. And then Manwe does this thing where he tries to kind of silver lining it, and he says, well, Iluvatar did tell us that through evil deeds may arise wonderful things. And Namo says, and yet still remain evil. And that's important to keep in mind. Sid, go ahead. You have a minute.
Mm-hmm. Just talked about fate, which is not the same as destiny. And I'll have to do another half hour, because this was my topic and we never quite got there. So I'm going to do another one.
We went so off on this.
No, you went off on the first key, the big tough question, and I'm glad we did. But I'm going to come back to smaller questions. Mm-hmm. But to be very clear, everyone involved in the destruction of the ring, Gollum, Bilbo, Frodo in particular, was given a destiny, a job to do, and when in the opening chapter where I'm sorry, I'm losing my words now. Gandalf explains everything to Frodo, and reveals what the ring is. He sets up that there is a destiny that we've been talking about in these 3 episodes, and there will be one more now, where everyone who touches the ring is part of a job that Eru has given them to do. Elrond he says, you 8 guys, you can do whatever you want. Frodo, you can't quit.
He was the only one that it was really giving any sort of like mandate. But it was only. It's important to note.
That is what I mean by a destiny.
Yeah, but it was important.
And Gollum was given a destiny to hide the ring for 500 years.
Absolutely.
And did a good job.
He did an excellent job. But it's also important.
It was just a little hard.
That Frodo volunteered, though. Nobody would have forced him.
I need an extension.
What's that?
I want to add something to this. Yeah, I want to add something.
We're out of time, but go ahead. But before you do, I just wanted to highlight what CW Train in the chat said, because I think that you'll like this, Sid. He says, tangents are half the fun, never stop.
Yeah.
Thank you. Matt,
my thought to wrap this up in one way related to Turin. Turin is never concerned about what Eru wants him to do. He's never really concerned about lining himself up with the Ainulindale in that way. He's consumed by the curse, and eventually his destiny becomes his fate, because he is so influenced by the evil nature of the fork in the road that all of his other sub-forks are on that side of the aisle. And he doesn't ever get a way to get back because he's not interested or aware of the other side. I think this is one of Tolkien's lessons here, which is if you let curses or the things around you or evil around you influence you, pretty soon all of your free choice is basically on what you might call the black side of the aisle.
Yeah.
And that's all the choice you've got at that point.
He was one big walking self-fulfilling prophecy, Turin Turambar. You know.
And so is the entire army of the dead that Aragorn freed. They had all gotten caught up in an oath. Later in 2026, we'll
have to talk. Yeah, we'll have to talk about oaths.
But coming back to fate, Gandalf explains what to do. All we can do is do our best
with the time
that is given us. Yep. And that refers to both people with fate and also any ordinary person. And when I finish this topic off next month, I'm not sure which one
it'll be February.
I'll come back on very little things. Why was it so important that Bilbo was a bachelor? That Frodo never had a love? Why was that important to Tolkien? Was there ever a chance for Gollum? And what would Gollum have done if he had repented? Tolkien answers that one completely. And it brings it back to very personal. How do I live my life given what Eru does at the beginning and end of everything, and we're caught in the middle?
That's a whole other can of worms that I'd love to open up with you one day, Sid.
It's a whole case of worms.
Yeah, it is. It's a pallet of worms, but specifically about Frodo and Gollum especially is really interesting. But let's set another 2 minutes, because now it's going to be Matt's turn to introduce a topic. And I wanted to welcome in, I hope I'm saying your name right, Jed Edge, who just said he just found the channel and loves the channel, thought that he knew a lot about Tolkien, but is learning a lot from my videos and from us right here. So thank you for coming by. Matt, I'm giving you 2 minutes to prepare the topic for our next segment, so go ahead.
I am going to be trying to focus on an area of the legendarium that's not very common, and that's going to be the first half of the Third Age concerning the corruption and the fall of men during that period of time. And I want to be talking about basically the fall of Arnor and the three provinces of Arthedain, Cardolen, and Rudar. But more importantly, I want to be talking about questions that really focus on these two types of questions. What shall we do, and how shall we then live? And the idea here is, how do great societies, even after the fall of Numenor, we already know how bad, but this thing continues on by a lack of upkeep on some of the great fortresses that are built by the Numenorians and are then slowly abandoned. I mean, even the gates, the black gates of Mordor are built by the Numenorians, and Minas Morgul, is built by the Numenorians.
Minas Ithil.
Minas Ithil was the name by the Numenorians, and the Tower of the Moon, and it becomes Minas Morgul, the Tower of Black Magic, basically black sorcery, and these are all lost, and Arnor is then lost. And what kind of apathy and stagnation has to happen in a society, one act at a time, 1 year at a time, one family at a time, before the accumulated neglect leads to complete and total collapse, and then in this case, Arnor falls, and the whole thing is overrun by the Witch King.
I've said it before, Matt. It's the difference between there's a lot of differences between the three of us. But in the way that we utilize the time in the beginning, the 2 minutes, right? You always use exactly 2 minutes. I don't know if you're timing it or something, but you always use exactly 2 minutes. It's amazing to me. Sid always goes a little bit over, but, it's okay. And I'm always like, after 30 seconds, and I'm like, yeah, I'm done. Let's talk about it, I always use less time. But I don't know how you do that.
There's clocks in Mordor.
There's clocks in Mordor, exactly. I'm going to set up a half hour here. And to answer your question, Dylan, the Father Christmas reading I'm going to do on Christmas Day. We're not doing that today. That will be on a stream that I will do Christmas evening. So that's not today. Okay. All right. A half hour. Let's go. I wanted to sort of just because you mentioned Numenor and all the things that they built. And I think that what we have to understand is that a lot of that stuff was built in the Second Age with the idea that they were going to take over Middle-earth and sort of colonize it. And that was more of the kings like Pharazôn. Whereas I think Elendil came into it, obviously, with a much more faithful, friendlier to elves, friendlier to Eru the One and to the Valar. And I think that's part of the reason that some of these outposts started to get abandoned, and obviously they had issues with plagues and they had issues with depopulation, but also on a smaller level, and we see this in the First Age and Second Age as well, is that long pieces tend to make people relax a lot, and we had that at the beginning of the Third Age. I mean, yes, Isildur was killed in a horrible way, and the realm got fractured, and there were a lot of geopolitics going around, and people weren't worried about what Elendil wanted because Elendil was dead. And you mentioned the family aspect, and one of the things that always sort of struck me as interesting was Anarian's son, who was the king of Gondor. When Isildur and his sons, Isildur is now the High King, so he's the king of Gondor and Arnor, are saying, we're going to go visit Arnor, we're going to be up there for a while. And Tolkien sort of makes this little aside where he says, I forget the king's name, but he was Anarian's son, he was the first king of Gondor. He couldn't wait to get rid of them. He couldn't wait for Isildur to leave. And we start to see this sort of thing where everybody sort of wants their own little piece. Why did Arnor fracture into 3 pieces? Because there was a king that died, and he had 3 sons, and of course the eldest was to become the king, but then the other 2 are like, well, what about us? And instead of having a civil war, they carved it up into 3 pieces. Was that the right thing to do? Is the real question. Go ahead, Sid.
I think it's important to say, without allegory, because Tolkien didn't do that, there's a lot of pieces of this you can map into the history of the early Middle Ages. So we have, help me out here, with the greatest king of France in the Middle Ages who had 3 sons and...
Are we talking about Charlemagne or?
Yeah, Charlemagne divided the largest kingdom since the Roman Empire to give each of his sons one country. So there is a mapping there. And if you want, again, not allegory, but themes, what is the central theme in all that descent after the Roman Empire that is what we used to call the Dark Ages, the early Middle Ages? Is that 2 things ruin any large nation, or sometimes prevent any large nation from forming. Plague, 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 war, 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 plague, plague, war. And people say, Arnor was left at peace. Yeah, with the Witch King stirring up plagues to run through. One I keep coming up with lately, and I've written several answers about it lately, is why didn't Sauron, when he became the necromancer, fight a war to destroy Thranduil's kingdom? And the answer is he didn't need to. For what he wanted, he had a total victory. Elves don't particularly like living in dark, dead woods full of poisonous meat and spiders, and a river they used to swim in, where if they go in now, they'll fall asleep and never wake up.
Well, no, hold on. They set that up, that enchantment.
Really? Okay, missed that one. Okay.
Because when Bombor fell into it, and when Bilbo was blasted by Thranduil's magic, they had the same dream.
Missed that. Okay. I'll take it back.
Okay.
But in general...
That was to try to keep Sauron out.
Right, but they didn't want... They wanted Greenwood the Great, and they wanted it back, and
absolutely.
They briefly got it back, and then they lost it again by the time of the War of the Ring.
Very briefly, yeah.
Yes, and so... And what does Sauron was? Sauron doesn't want his enemies dead. If they're dead, he can't keep torturing them.
Yeah,
Gandalf is utterly explicit about that.
That's so true, because that's a Morgoth thing, wanting to kill everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And so the same is true of Arnor. Slowly defeated by the Witch King of Angmar, primarily through plague. And when you're already weak and half dead, and your great fortresses have not enough people in them, then by war, and war with undead creatures to boot, hence the Barrow Downs.
And to shift it over to Gondor for a moment, because Gondor had their own issue. Let's talk about the kin strife, because I think that's like what Matt is looking is. Let's talk about the stuff from the Third Age that doesn't get talked about all that much. The kin strife is this situation where there's a king, and he's getting old, and so everybody starts looking at who the next king is going to be, and they're saying, well, wait a minute, this guy, the king's eldest son, the king's only son, as a matter of fact, he went off to Rovanion and married a woman there. He wasn't even born in Gondor, and they had an issue with the fact that he was born in Rovanion. His wife was not from Gondor. They had a real issue with that, and that's a long way away from where it was in the late Third Age, where Gondor is very cosmopolitan. There's all sorts of people that live there. Very few of them are actually Númenórean. They sort of point out like Faramir and Imrahil as being the ones that are very extremely Númenórean, but there's people of all sorts of like colors and stripes and origins, and they're all welcome there. But there was a time where Gondor was kind of a nasty place towards foreigners, and we saw this with the civil war that happened there, where the king's cousin said, we're not going to let you be the king because you weren't born in this country, even though you're of the line of kings. And then, there's a period where he's in exile, and then he has to come back, and then the other guy's in exile, and then he comes back, and this series of civil wars, the black breath out of Mordor coming in and creating more plagues, because that's, it's not just the Witch King. The Witch King learned from his master, Sauron. That's one of his favorite things to do, is let's make everybody sick so they can't fight back. And then you start to see, like what Matt was talking about, they start to shrink towards Minas Tirith. And there's a lot of parts of Gondor that are sort of ripe for the picking. Does Sauron come in and just start taking over these parts? No, he's got people to do that for him. He's got the Corsairs of Umbar. He's got Easterlings. He's got Haradrim, the wild men of Dunland. Anybody who just doesn't like Gondor and the thing that they've set up is going to come in, and they're going to say, well, I have squatters' rights now, and I can do whatever I want. And it's a long time before Aragorn comes along, and it takes him decades to figure it all out.
And I'll add one more thing that Sauron has: immortality.
Mm-hmm.
He thinks about war in terms of thousands of years.
Yeah.
So war and plague, the siege never ends. When Sauron is gone, the Witch King takes over, and Gondor and Arnor are under intense or not as intense, plague or war or both, endless assault.
And I'm glad you brought up the Witch King, because he's mortal, but because of this ring that he has, he's starting to think in that immortal sense.
Yeah. Well, he has no point of time where he will die. He's not immortal, but he is in human lifetime.
He's stuck. He's stuck.
And how long was he around? What was his creation date?
Well, we don't know.
50 years before he got
we
the
don't
ring.
know. We don't know exactly, but the Nazgul started appearing about 500 years after Sauron took the rings back. So somewhere in that range, plus the whole Third Age until he was killed.
It's Second Age, 1695.
Yeah, it's around there. Yeah.
That's when he appeared.
Yeah, that's when he first appeared.
But it might have taken 500 years to make him what he was.
It might have taken a long time.
Yeah,
because when Frodo saw his face, he was old.
Yeah, I suspect that the mouth of Sauron was the Sauron trying to create another ring wraith
without a ring,
using the ring he got from
one of the dwarves. From Thror's ring. I tend to think the mouth of Sauron as being a bit older than that, but because they said he was a Black Númenórean. But I
missed that.
Yeah, because that's what Gandalf said, at least. I think he was just a sorcerer who figured out how to unnaturally extend his life and had this blind devotion to Sauron. And nothing, these Dark Lords, they love nothing more than an idiot who is going to be completely loyal to them, because they're not loyal to anybody. They don't believe in loyalty. The only ones that were truly loyal were the Nazgul, because they were forced to be loyal. They had these rings that were compelling them to be loyal. So, you get these situations where they're anchored to the world. Their bodies are dead and gone, but they're anchored to the world. They can't leave. They can't truly die until the ring dies. Now, did you know that, Tolkien in the early versions, he wanted the Witch King to still be there after the ring was destroyed, and have Frodo to basically tell him to jump in the volcano. He cut that part out. He wrote like 5 different death scenes for the Witch King before he settled on the one that we wound up with.
Touch on this for a second.
Go ahead, Matt.
Because it's going to go into what I'm talking about related to the Black Númenóreans in Umbar and a couple other things, and how this is going on and on for such a long period of time. We'll talk about the Witch King real quick. So he gets his ring given to him, a ring of power that he uses to stay alive all this time, in SA 1695. By 2250 is about the time he is starting to lose, recorded this way. About 2250 is about the time he's nothing more than just an invisible wraith at that point. This is about 500 years. It's about 550 years it takes for him to what we might call dissipate into nothing more than a wraith. But what's interesting at that point, though, is he is already 500 years old after the ring. That is,
Yeah.
after he gets his ring, he's 500 years old. But he doesn't start his campaign against Arnor until Third Age 1300. That's another 2,500 years. He's
because
around for.
he's starting to think like Sauron, because Sauron's,
Yes.
he's not around right now, so he's starting to think, I got to do my Lord's bidding.
That's right.
And I've got to think in these long periods, not like a mortal that I was and still kind of am, but I've got to start thinking of long-term plans.
We don't know if this guy's a Black Numenorian for sure, but we have some evidence that suggests he's Black Numenorian. That's why a lot of experts think that he is, because of his general size description of how big he was compared to the other ones.
He was a big one. Tolkien said 3 of the Nazgul were from Numenor. So we don't know which 3, But I would think
which 3,
I would think he
but we
was
do
certainly
have
one
time.
of them.
Yeah, I would agree. We have more proof that he was than not. That's for sure.
Yeah.
We have no proof that he wasn't, but he was of large stature. The Numenorians were highly trained. We know that Tolkien says there was 3 of them. The likelihood that one of the 3 is the Witch King is, in my opinion, very high. But the point is that he was in this condition for 2,500 years before even the attacks on Arnor and the 3 different kingdoms, principalities, were divided. And he started with them because they were deemed to be the easiest ones to defeat because they were weak because of their own internal infighting. So the Witch King is demonstrating not only a length of time that is similar to Sauron, but he also is demonstrating some real military gifts that are very, very in line with Numenorian training, Numenorian leadership. And so I just wanted to touch on that real quick. And I want to come back to something else, let you guys cut in. But I want to go, this question in my segment, I want to go back to Umbar and the type of men these were real quick. So go ahead and then we'll come back.
I have one incredibly quick thought. So if I listen to you guys well, about 500 years after he got his ring, he became a wraith, which means that compared to Gollum, he was a wimp. After 500 years, Gollum was thin and tough still. There you go.
Well, I mean, also the One Ring is so different from all of the others too. So that, but it is remarkable because Gollum's a hobbit, and hobbits are tough like that. Gollum.
Hold on.
I'll save that for February.
Yeah,
Let's
we'll
go
say
back to Matt stuff.
The rings are definitely different. One is a tool of complete domination and alignment with Sauron, and probably a ring that Witch King never ever took off. So those are 3 differences right there. The Ring of Power itself is preservatory, so it has a different skew, a different burn rate.
They're definitely different. But it says right in the way that like a hobbit wouldn't have fallen as quickly as a man would. Just like we saw it with the dwarves, the rings didn't really do much to them.
I have a question for you guys on this topic, because when I read just The Lord of the Rings carefully, I sometimes get a sense that the 9 rings are being worn by the Nazgul, and sometimes get a sense that Sauron is holding them to keep the Nazgul prisoner.
I wrote a big thing about this late last year. I'm going to have to send it to you. It basically comes down to a difference in opinion between Gandalf and Galadriel. And Gandalf at some point changed his mind about who held the rings. And I think it's because he might have actually seen the Nazgul wearing them.
I was also thinking that it could be that Sauron was doing one thing at one time, another thing at another time.
Yes.
When he sends them out, they
He
have
might
the
have-
rings.
I mean, I always imagined that he did. I mean, there's no doubting that Tolkien wrote that he demanded them back from them at one point, and that he held on to them. However, when he sent them out to search for Baggins, he needed them to be as scary and as intimidating as possible. He's sending the mouth of Sauron up to be the nice diplomat at the Lonely Mountain, but these guys are the blunt instrument. And
I've got
I
proof of
always
that.
imagine him giving them the rings back and saying, "Go, find them."
I've got proof of that, John. Actually, I think it's proof anyway, and that is that in order to do the coordinated search and reporting back, Sauron is trying to find his own ring. There is every reason to believe that he would give his 9 Nazgul, they're all in operation. He would give them the rings for this number one most important mission over the last several
Yeah.
thousand years. There's no way he's not going to give them the rings. And the second reason is because those are now conduit communication items that allow him to speak and understand what's going on the front or during the search. The third reason I think this is true is because look at how many there was a couple of times where they lose their mounts, they lose their clothes, they lose their stuff, and they're able to retreat and get re-equipped with their flying fell beasts and things like this in ways that doesn't seem possible without some kind of cooperation and coordination going on. I mean, these guys, otherwise they'd be scattering around trying to find their way back, and they wouldn't be able to be known where they were. And
Well,
I, I'm,
he had the mouth also coordinating them. They would meet in northern
sure,
Rohan, and he would get their orders from Sauron through the mouth as
sure,
well.
sure. I just think there was too many moving parts and too many short gaps in recovery times that
Yeah.
indicate this wasn't a haphazard, reassembly of their powers and their weapons and
Yeah.
their flying fell beasts and things like that. They had their rings and they were in communication, and that makes more sense for how much order we saw.
I just made a failed attempt at fighting that article. I'll make a better attempt at it and I'll send it to you because I did a deep dive into the emissary that comes to the Lonely Mountain because was that a Nazgul or was that the mouth of Sauron or was it somebody else? And I was able to kind of do what Matt does and come to the point where we've 99% proven that it was the mouth of Sauron, and and that
Yeah.
But anyway, Corsairs of Umbar was another thing that I did a deep dive on recently, so I'm glad you wanted to talk about that, Matt, because the question that I was asking was, were they a people with a united culture? And I wrote the whole history of them and everything, and I said, here's the thing. Their culture is basically, we don't like Gondor. There are a lot of different people from a lot of different places. And Umbar if you look at the map, it's an incredibly important strategic point for any war in the region. Pharazôn even used this is where he landed when he came to attack Mordor, and that was his staging ground. And the fact that even after the Return of the King, deep into the Fourth Age, Aragorn had to go to war with them. He was able to make peace with everybody else. The Easterlings went home willingly. The Haradrim, he had peace talks with them, and he successfully sued for peace. But he had to pacify Umbar because their culture was founded on an absolute hatred for anything Númenórean.
Yeah, and that leads me to a section I want to talk about related to Umbar.
Hey, Red.
Now, when Umbar is founded and there's the fall of Numenor, the Silmarillion talks about this concept that the lesser part and the greater part. These are typical terms of 1/4 to 1/3 being the lesser part. It's a way of English tradition to kind of speak
Mm-hmm.
this way. Most people agree that this is the faithful being about 1/3 of Numenor, and the Kingsmen, or the later Black Númenóreans, as they came to be called on the mainland area of Umbar, are about 2/3 of this. Now, if you look at general dissipation of populations in Numenor and their holdings in Umbar and elsewhere, there's no reason to believe, there's no evidence for this, that there is a different spread of this 1/3, 2/3 things in population densities of these political factions in Umbar or anywhere else. So, if Umbar, by the time of the early Third Age, at the end of the fall of the Second Age and the end of Numenor, then you have about 1/3 of the populace that is faithful in Umbar, and 2/3 of the populace that are basically Kingsmen still, who've just survived. And the only ships that make it out of Numenor are these 9 ships that escaped. that have possibly 2,000 to 2,500 people on board. So this isn't a lot of people coming to shore. They're telling everybody what's happened with the big news, but
Okay,
they're
just to cut in on the numbers here, while I believe you're absolutely correct about only about 1/3 of Numenor's population being the faithful, we also have to remember that at the point of the Akalabeth, it's probably a lot less because so many of them were murdered and sacrificed in the Temple of Melkor.
yes, that is a study I did an article on once too, and you're right. It's the 1/3 was before this last period of 50 some years, where there was not only the great armament, but there was also the reign, the co-reign of Sauron in Numenor when all that began. So yes, that probably cut into the numbers quite a bit. When I talk about it, I talk about it in the framework of 25 to 33% of the populace, taking into account what you've said. And what the reason I'm saying this is there wasn't a lot of people that came over on the ships that were left. So we already started with an area that hated anything Numenorian, for one, except Numenorians that agreed with them about how much they hated, the other free peoples of Northern Middle Earth. So they started to find a kinship a little bit, or at least an uncomfortable relationship of
I mean,
cooperation
they were essentially the
with the Black
privateers.
Numenorians. Yeah. So their Black Numenorians are getting along with the Haradrim, the Southrons, and then of course there's the Easterlings, and they're like, well, you know what? We don't like Numenorians either, but you guys are Black Numenorians, so you guys are kind of cool.
It basically became anybody that it was opposed to Gondor had a coalition there. Sid has something to say.
Well, when you think about these things, they may have hated Gondor, but from way far away, much further than Umbar. But another point is,
exactly, Jed.
Bring this back to how Tolkien writes. His rule is that everything in the Silmarillion, the Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings was what Bilbo and Frodo knew through the people they knew, obviously Rivendell, little bit of Galadriel, and Aragorn, etc.
And Gandalf as well.
And Gandalf. But if you look at history, all we know of Carthage is what Rome says about Carthage. And we believe their religion involved routine child sacrifice at temples of Baal, etc., etc. And we know almost nothing about the culture, but that's only because at that time, the Romans were the victors, and we only have the Romans' histories. And a similar thing is happening here. We don't know that there wasn't a beautiful indigenous culture among the folk of Umbar or the folk of Dunland, who got run out of Rohan and stuck at the western end, and so forth.
Sid.
We simply do not have the story because we got the story of the guys that Frodo got his story.
Sid, I love that you're talking about the Easterlings in this way because it's so perfectly... I mean, we still have like 4 minutes left, but it so perfectly goes into my topic for our last segment of the East. And it is true that the Gondorian view of the Easterlings and the mercenaries from Khand and the Haradrim as well is deeply propagandized. And we know that the Corsairs, though, the ones that all... And they're not one people. They're from Numenor, they're from Gondor, they're from the Eastlands, they're from the Southlands. Some of them are from Gondor. Some of them are criminals that escaped to Gondor. They really are just purely bad because they're the only ones that Aragorn couldn't make peace with. But we see the Easterlings. I'm going to go a little bit into the history of like Rhûn and the Ants to the east at the beginning of the next section that we're going to do. But this is a land that has been under an oppression of darkness for thousands and thousands of years. And when the One Ring is destroyed, everybody over there suddenly is like, finally, we're free. Because what happens in the north, at the Lonely Mountain, where King Brand is laying there dead, and what's his face? Dane the Second Ironfoot is dying, and they're just barely holding back Sauron's forces from the east so that they won't overrun Rivendell and drive all the elves to the sea. The One Ring is destroyed. What do the Easterlings do? They don't act like the orcs did at the Black Gate, where they lose their minds and start killing each other and themselves. They just surrender. They don't even surrender. They just go home. They just say, you know what, we're done. We're sorry. We're going. And they go home because they have their own lives and their own people and their own families. And they've been under Sauron's rule for a really long time. And as I'm going to talk about, there's a deeper history beyond Sauron over there.
That's going to be a good segment. And let me build on what you just said related to length of time. I've done some quick calculations here. And when the ring goes to the three Númenórean Nazgûl in 1695, which we think is the Witch King as well, it was just 5 years later that Sauron launched his largest and first campaign, which got trapped at the Battle of Gwaithlo in 1701, second age of 1701. It's a large force. In my research, it seems to be probably a force of probably about 200,000 orcs under the personal command of Sauron. That's how it's laid out in the Silmarillion. They get trapped between two forces, 10,000 Númenórean, 10,000 men of Númenóreans, and 10,000 under Gil-galad. And they get wiped out, and Sauron barely escapes with a cloak on his back. Now, from that point, which is SA, Second Age, 1701, Gwaithlo, to the end of the Third Age and the War of the Ring is 4,719 years of this kind of siege, of this kind of attack, going on in every which way, even after Sauron is dissipated and gone.
That's time.
And carried on.
If you could just wrap it up, because that's time.
Yeah, it's that kind of time that has been going on, even when Sauron has been gone, that the Witch King has carried this on. Then he comes back, and Sauron carries us forward. So 4,700 years of this type of combat with men between men, the hate and distrust and envy and everything else that just destroyed this land apart after Númenor fell, just continued to go on and on. And we all know, this is a big lesson for us from Tolkien, and wanted to talk about it a little bit. So thank you.
Yeah,
it's good segment.
Great segment. Okay, I'm gonna set myself 2 minutes here, although I probably won't use it all because you guys already kind of introduced what I want to talk about. So let's talk. We talked about. Last month, we talked about the origins of the dwarves. And the origins of elves is something that Tolkien himself went over greatly. The origins of hobbits is something that Sid talked about and that I've talked about at great length in the past. Let's talk about men. Mortal men. People like us. Where did we awaken and what happened to us? The first time that we hear of what the elves in Beleriand called the Atani, which is the Gnomish or Sindarin word for men. The Quenya word is Edain, which is where you get words like Dunedain and such. They came out of the eastern lands because that's where we awoke, in places like, what we would call Rhûn, beyond the edge of the map that you see in The Lord of the Rings. And we came out of there, and there were these three great houses, and the head of one of the great houses was this very noble man named Bear the Old. And he had a conversation with Finrod Felagund. He was the first man to sort of make friends with an elf and learn their languages and everything, other than the Avari that were out there that taught them early languages. But he said, there's a darkness out there that we'd rather not talk about. We're escaping something terrible. So what I'm basically getting at is we know that when men awoke, Melkor heard rumor that men, mortals, the second-born, had come to life, had awakened in the earth, in the east, and he left his fortress and he went to the east, and we don't really hear much about what happened. But we know from the words in the Children of Húrin that he told the first men that he was God, that he created the world, that there was nothing beyond the world, that there was nothing beyond death, and that they should all start worshiping him, otherwise he was going to kill them, and then they would be cast into this everlasting darkness with nothing to ever hope for. And eventually, some of these men thought, we kind of think this isn't true, and it's sort of like the opposite of what happened in Númenor, where there was a faction that wasn't faithful to the local religion, except they were the good guys this time, and they escaped out of the east, and they said their hearts yearned for the west, and they came as far as Beleriand, and this is where, we get these great men like Tur and Turin and Húrin and Beor and all these guys. But that's my intro there.
A quick note of language immediately. Those men you just named became the elf friends. Mm-hmm. And that is not a trivial term. We see it when Gildor and Glorian names Frodo and Elfrand, when Elrond compares Frodo to Beren. Elves have an ability to see the light of Theia, the light of soul in each person. And they can detect a greatness of soul that would allow these people to be genuine allies.
And the elves. They're not declaring that they're elf friends. They're recognizing that they're elf friends.
They're recognizing, yes, that's an important... I see that you are from the moment it happens. And that's a very, very important quality. And also, but then after that, of course, once they see each other, sometimes they fall in love and have kids. And that also uplifts humanity. So what we're seeing in the lens you're talking about, the East, is the people who were in no way ever uplifted by contact with the elves, assisting the elves and being assisted by them, upliftment by the elves, and ultimately intermarriage. And without that, what is humanity like? I think Tolkien is showing us what is humanity like if not only have we never met or heard of Eru, we've never even met or heard of anyone who ever heard of Eru.
So basically the question that I'm proposing here for this section is let's talk about these eastern lands and the Veil of Darkness. We'll come out of Beleriand because we know what happens in Beleriand. We don't need to talk about Eriador. We don't need to talk about Ravanian. Let's talk about Rhûn. Let's talk about the eastern lands. What was it like living under the cult of Melkor, and how was it that some people, some mortals, managed to learn the truth? And I would say that the only way that this could possibly have happened, there's two ways. And I'm basically just asking you guys which way you think it is. One is through some sort of miracle in which either Eru or the Valar spoke directly to someone, and that this person managed to not immediately be executed and tortured and all that, and managed to spread the word. Something like Durin looking into the mirror and seeing stars above his head that would let him know that there are other dwarves out there. Something like that. Or did they run into some of the Avari elves that told them, yeah, no, that Melkor guy, he's no good?
I see a third possibility.
This is long. Wait, hold on. Let me just answer the chat here. Dylan, know that long before the Blue Wizards. Go ahead, Sid.
Yeah. I thought the Blue Wizards too, but we won't probably get that far in history before the show ends. No matter what anyone is told, what Tolkien called our Fea, what Christians call our soul, what we often think of as our own heart or spirit, was created in the image by the Creator, in the image of the Creator. And so I believe that potentially for everyone, and very deeply for some, the Fea knows the truth. And that can't be overshadowed even by Melkor in every soul. There's a freedom of soul. And there is an article Tolkien wrote, I have to hunt it down, that each soul has a free choice that has nothing to do with power and is more powerful than power.
So you're saying that
to know and live the truth.
Without a miracle or without the elves, even then, some and all three could be true, by the way, for different people, because you know what, I like the idea that all three are true, because there were three houses of the Edain that came from this. So one could have been a vision from the Valar, one could have been what you're talking about, where they just said, you know what, this doesn't feel right, and another could have run into a pack of Avari elves. So I love that idea. We have to talk about the fact that, like, before we really met the elves, and even after, we had a lot of wrong ideas about the world work. We see it in the Children of Húrin when Melkor, he takes Húrin and he puts him upon a literal mountain of corpses. And he tells him, I am God. And Húrin says, I've heard that one before. You said that to our ancestors, and even some of them knew it was lies, which supports what you said, Sid, there. You are not the Elder King. You did not make the world. And there are others like you. You know, of course, referring to the Valar. But there's also a really important character, who's a very minor character, Andreth, the wise woman. She was a seer who was good friends with Finrod. We keep coming back to Finrod. And they had a lengthy debate that you could read about in Morgoth's Ring, where we learn that Andreth, and she had a history of making a lot of, like, really kind of bad prophecies that didn't pan out. Like, she said Túrin's spirit was going to return and kill on Calagon the Black. We know that didn't happen because we know Eärendil did it. But anyway, she had the idea that mortality, that death itself, was God's punishment for man's early dalliance in worshiping the devil. And Finrod's like, oh, no. Mortality is a gift. You get to go be with Eru. And she says, but that's terrible because it's going to separate us from the elves, our friends. And he says, no, death is going to unite us, because one day the world is going to end and the elves are going to die. And then we'll be together. Now, Matt, I want your thoughts since I see you nodding.
Oh, I think this is great. I just absolutely agree with what you both said. And I'll just say one thing before I say my thing. Earlier, John, you said, sometimes we have these discussions and we come to a conclusion that, you can't improve. A lot of this stuff can't be proven. But you get to the area of 90 percentile and higher with no competing evidence in opposition of where you are in your 90th percentile of assurity. Mm-hmm. And you have to draw these conclusions because there's no other statistical, logical thing that has a competition to where we are with this. And this conversation just reminds me a little bit of that. I'll start off with number one. Melkor heard about them and left his fortress. The only other time he left his fortress, according to the Silmarillion, was when he walked out of his subterranean throne and met Fingolfin in one-on-one combat. This is how important the rumor of the awakening men were. He had to be there. He only left his place twice, one for personal combat and one because the men were awakened and he wanted to go and do what he could to get them on his side. But the Silmarillion also talks very interestingly about this concept of children. Eru is in first-person narrative during this part of the Silmarillion, where he says to Aule that the dwarves are going to have to wait and sleep, and because he doesn't want them to wake before the children of my choice, and the children are of his choice are the elves and men, the adopted, as opposed to the children of his adoption, which are the dwarves. End quote. So, elves and men are akin in a very particular way, which is they have what you might call a similar polarity to their gut instinct about what's right and wrong about things. And that leads me to this idea that the nature of men must have had an aversion to evil, and sense that Melkor had an evil streak in him that was reviling to them, that gave them red flags, that was false in some way. Maybe not as strong as elves might have seen it, but it was definitely there.
Evil's always a choice, right?
It is. Well, yes, it's always a choice.
It's always a choice.
But if you have a sense of what it is, that it's not sustainable, that it would burn itself out, that it would destroy itself if left to its nth degree, which is a Kantian principle in categorical imperatives in philosophy, which means it fulfills itself and destroys itself, therefore it's not a sustainable act, and therefore the act is wrong.
Which goes back to what Iluvatar said. In the end,
Exactly.
it doesn't matter, because you're going to you're still working for me. You're still doing my will.
Yes, exactly. And so they sense that this can't be the way it is, because it's hollow. It doesn't lead anywhere. It leads nothing but destruction, and that's not sustainable and not good and doesn't grow and all this. And so I agree with what both of you have said, actually, not to even just be harmonious with you guys, but Sid has said something which I ultimately agree with, which is the natural aversion to Melkor is the primary. And when they heard the same thing from the elves, it helped confirm it for them. And when they maybe heard it from, I think, Orome, possibly, that Orome is still in the world and around, that it's also possibly double confirmed for them, but not the primary.
I think it more likely would have been Olmo, because he was the one that was very concerned with men.
That's a good candidate too. But my point is, between one of the two, because we have evidence in the Silmarillion that both of them were what you might call Valar afoot in Arda. Okay, so it's one of the two, possibly both, but I think that they are those interactions with the elves and the Valar, the two we named, are confirming something that they actually primarily feel, because men are also the children of Eru, like the elves are, and they can sense it. They can sense something off about this guy after a while. So
and the children of Eru made in the image of Eru. We know, even if Tolkien never said that directly, we know that's what he meant. But we have to add one more. It may not be, elf, the prefix is EL, and star, the prefix is EL. Elves born the same time that Varda cast all of the lesser stars into the sky are deeply attuned to that. But anybody who has a chance to look up at the stars at night. So we've got to throw Varda in there as another external energy that can trigger.
That's a great point, because
you can't tell me the world is ugly. Look up.
Yeah, no matter where you are in the world, you can see the stars. I wanted to cast our minds back.
Except underneath Mount Doom when it's going
Well, yeah. As long as you could see the outside, right? I wanted to cast our minds back to something that, Sid, you said a while back about how good can create terror in evil. And we see that time and time again about how afraid the evil characters are of the good characters. And Melkor, the most powerful being in the universe, because of course God is existing outside of the universe, he's the most powerful. Tulkas, not even in the top 8, beats the heck out of him. Why? Because he's afraid. He hears that horn of Orome, and he hears the laughter, and he quails and he quivers. The evil characters tend to be very cowardly. So we saw it in Numenor about how they weaponize this. And I think this is what was alluded to in the Children of Húrin about, the eastern lands and the darkness that lay in our past, is that these men who did not fall for Melkorism, that did not buy into it, were hunted and tortured and all sorts of terrible things, because that's all that they can think of, is to try to make people afraid and try to hurt them. They can't win hearts and minds, is what I'm getting at.
But a lot of them never left the cultural tradition either. A lot of the Easterlings did never, many men left, but a lot of them never progressed past the cultural tradition of worshiping death and the darkness and the power, structure of that side of the aisle. And this is really good for the show because it shows people that, we're dealing with Easterlings and Southerlings, Southrons, and Black Numenorians. Now this is all over the place. This is really what's the scourge that is all around or beset against Gondor and Arnor during all this period of time, and what they're facing, and how much damage Morgoth really did to a very huge proportion of the awakened men at that time.
And it's interesting that, we were the second born. We came after the elves. And we came into a place of darkness and immediately had the devil breathing down our necks. And it's sort of similar to what happened with the elves. They awoke in darkness, and all of a sudden Melkor started taking some of them and doing terrible things to them. But what's interesting is that with the elves, the Valar came to the rescue. They physically came to do war against Melkor for the sake of the elves. We were kind of on our own. And you can see in the Silmarillion that the elves are favored by the Valar in so many ways. They won't even bring us to the Undying Lands because we die, and that makes them sad. They want a land where nothing dies. Even they made the plants immortal, they made the animals immortal, but they don't have the ability to make mortals immortal. They don't understand the concept of mortality. They don't understand the point of mortality. But Iluvatar does, and we're his favorites. And I think in time, they'll come to realize that. And in time, and we start to see that at the end of the Third Age, because they went from no mortals allowed to, you know what? Frodo can come. Bilbo can come. Sam can come. You know what, Gimli? You can come too.
Yeah. There's a lot going on when the words like...
I'm sorry. I just want to highlight in chat, Mr. Rippiser said elves are Nepo babies. Disconnected. Yeah, I'm being told on Twitch that the stream went down, and I was actually watching the stream back on YouTube, and it seems to have stopped. Okay, it's working on YouTube again. It looks like it's working on Twitch again. We had a little bit of a blip there, but we're back. I did pause the timer there for a moment. Let's continue. I'm sorry, Sid. Go ahead. Continue with your point.
Not a problem. I'll just pick up from what I was saying.
Okay, yeah.
Anytime Tolkien talks
sorry about that, folks.
Yeah. Anytime Tolkien talks about God's children, whether original or adopted, it's important to look back at how that language is used in both the Hebrew Bible, what Christians call the Old Testament, and the New Testament. And God's original children are everyone descended from Abraham, the Jewish tradition. But it grew to what is called the Abrahamic traditions. And ironically, Tolkien was being really silly when he chose this, thinking of the dwarves as the adopted children. Well, in the Bible, the Christians are the adopted children.
Yeah. And it's interesting because he pointed out he didn't write the dwarves to specifically be Judaic, especially since they started out as nefarious in the early sort of drafts. But when he reflected upon all the events of the Third Age specifically, he said, they seem sort of Semitic, and that's why he was really wanting to give them a happier ending, and with Durin reclaiming Moria and everything, because he's like seeing what happened in the real world and saying, well, let's write, the fantasy where it all turns out okay,
Yes, but then he go in that one line about and children by adoption. He actually points to, but wait, what if we flip it all on its head and think of the dwarves as the latecomers as the Christians?
Yeah. Oh, of course.
So
I mean, I've always said,
the
the elves and the men are the children of Iluvatar. The dwarves are the adopted children. I always like to say the hobbits are the grandchildren, because they're derived of mortal men. But of course, that's a whole other thing, But yeah, so
February again.
Yeah. So with 10 minutes left here, we are stronger than the elves. Is my takeaway from all this. We're stronger than the elves because we got out from under Melkor without the direct intervention of the Valar.
And no place to go that was protected.
Yeah, they just struck out to the west because that's where their heart said to go, and they found friends. They also found war and strife and a whole lot of other terrible things.
Well, they also couldn't go to Valinor to hope for an immortal protected life because they were
Eärendil,
wherever they were.
Eärendil did.
Well,
but that was only because an elf and a man came together and made a child.
Well, I know, but even the first few generations are all going to look around and go, "Oh my God, we're all dying off at about 70 years of age. Wow, what an interesting phenomena."
Yeah.
Even before they knew anything of their true immortality, they knew they were immortal based on what they saw from the elves. And after a few generations, Gwindor, over here is, or whatever his name is barely aged. And
that's a bad example. Gwindor aged terribly.
Well, I don't mean Gwindor, but any elf, you pick your name.
He was the one that was tortured. Finrod.
Yeah, so you grew up with this guy playing, hopscotch, and then, you're 70 years old and dying, and the guy next to you is still the same age. They had it figured out, is my point. But the point is I'm trying to make is that men had nowhere to go and no long lives to expect. Now, and they didn't have any favor of the Valar either. There's 3 strikes against them,
and we still came out of the darkness. We still came out of the darkness.
And actually, the way you just said that, Matt, brings me to the central thing I'd like to say as we get close to the end, that this is the human dilemma. That only if we have some sense, with often no evidence and certainly no provable evidence in the world, that we are immortal in some sense, our soul is in fact immortal, that we are beloved by God, that we can be with God. The only sure place we find that is within our own heart, within our own spirit. And where I'd like to leave my piece, I may or may not comment on anything else you guys say in the next 10 minutes, but I want to leave to each of you, I always do this in every episode, to each of you who are here, what can you take from tonight that will give you your way home?
Wherever that home may be.
Well, it's only in one place. To who you truly are and how you are connected to what Matt has been saying.
One place for one person.
Side. Yeah. But for each of us, there's something that will bring us home to be both true to ourselves and connected to the flame eternal, to be what we Tolkien would call doing correct subcreation with the Creator within the harmonies of the light side, the light motif, not the Nebid motif of the Song of the Ainur. How are you going to do that for the next month using what we've shared with you? That's what I want to ask each reader.
You've got a lot of fans in the chat right now. Well, Jeddah says that he loves your mind. While that's happening, I wanted to also go back to something that you guys said earlier about Turin and about how he sort of marches to the beat of his own drum, and that he's not concerned with destiny or fate, except for, the curse that has been laid on his family, which is not as potent as he thinks it is, but he makes it happen, which is the whole point of that story. But in the way that we look at the elves and the elves look at us, and we see something really interesting, and I forget the character's name, but when Turin was really young and he lived in Nargothrond and he was growing up there, he knew this girl who was probably like 50 years old, but she was an elf and she looked like a little girl around his age, and she was sort of his tutor and his guide and his friend, and they would play together and everything. And Turin, who's a mortal man who, if he had not died in such a tragic way, probably would have lived about 70 years, but of course he didn't get to live that long because of the horrible things that happened to him. He didn't remember her. And Beleg Strongbow brought her up and said that she asked about him, and he didn't know what girl, what are you talking about? To him, that was just somebody in his past, some friend that he had for a little while, and he didn't remember her. And that's really weird. And then we go to her perspective. She's way older than, she might look like a little girl, but she's way older, and she's going to live tens of thousands of years. And she's going to live hundreds of thousands of years until the world ends, and she still remembered him. And that really says a lot about, and we keep coming back, we come back to this point in all three segments, the perception of time, and how Turin only looked forward. And that was his major moral failing, because he didn't learn anything from the past. He only looked forward. And that was an issue. And Sador tried to tell him that, because Sador gave him the same lesson that Beor gave to Finrod Felagund, that there is a darkness in our past, and we have to be aware of that. We came out of a great darkness. And I think Turin enjoyed being around Sador because he gave him a lot of attention, but I think it was a lot of blah, 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 blah to him when he was a little boy, and he didn't take it to heart.
And that's so great. And I will say it's also, not to override what you're saying, but to pair it up with something. And that is, you have no way of self-evaluating yourself if you don't have a sense of what's around you. If all you are is what you know in your plastic sack, if all you know is curses from Morgoth, and all your inputs and outputs are all negatively charged, negatively made, all the forks in the road are down that other path, then yes, you have free will, but you are not living all the choices that you could be living and choosing instead, because you don't know what the other side of the Isle of Light offers you. In other words, you don't. Turin never. He does what you're saying, John, exactly, but he also never tunes in with Eru or the good wholeness
or even the elves.
No, right.
He could have married Gil-galad's sister. I mean,
so what does he? My point is, he doesn't know what to compare it to, because all he has is the one side. He can't even judge his own path, because he doesn't have anything to compare it to other than his own forward thinking life on the next terrible decision after next terrible decision, with nothing to counterbalance it.
Two points I'm going to make, and then I'm going to pop it over to Sid for the last word here. One is specifically about Turin, that he could have Gwyndor. We talked about him just a little while ago. Gwyndor had this, great life set out in front of him, and then, Melkor ruined it. And then he was willing to step back from his own love, because he saw this blossoming romance between his former fiance and Turin. Turin could have married Gil-galad's sister, and Gwyndor believed that was going to break Morgoth's curse. And of course, he believed the lies of the dragon over anything the elves told him. and he wound up marrying his own sister instead, and then he wound up impaling himself on his own sword. So, Greek tragedy right there. The other thing is that Jordan sort of made a mockery, or not a mockery, but not a mockery on purpose, but he was making a mockery of free will by living as an outlaw and doing all these things, and I'm going to do whatever I want, and I'm just going to be my own man, and I'm going to forge my own path. And he was doing everything that Morgoth wanted him to do. Everything he played into, and he didn't listen to anyone around him, and he just heard everybody around him without meaning to. He had a good heart somewhere in there, but he was an example of, if he was in the East, he would have probably joined Melkor. Sid, go ahead.
And I want to bring this all back to us and our own lives to end. As a life coach for certain groups of people, including creative artists, I know 2 creative artists who grew up not only with parents as alcoholics, but in countries where alcohol is, the idea that people don't drink is so incredibly, I know someone who has lots of friends, and he doesn't know another couple besides him and his wife who don't drink, among hundreds of people. And I know someone else who, but he's a singer-songwriter.
And it's so difficult to not do as in Rune, right?
Yeah, and it's so difficult not to
that's a
slip back
challenge.
into it. Or to even
I got him. I broke Matt.
And when you're young, it's difficult to even know that there's an option.
We're out of time, but I want to let you finish.
When I grew up, I never knew anyone who was an artist until I broke away from a very narrow, closed family, lost in its own turn story like self-engagement. And so the first step is it's hard to even know there's something else that our creative heart wants us to do. And the second step is coming back to that, given the thousands or millions or billions of people who are living as if they're in the East. Yeah. Here we are in the West.
I agree, and I want to get a
What
T-shirt
we call
that says
do as in Rune, right?
No, I want to get a T-shirt that says "When in Rune."
When in Rune, yeah. When in Rune. ... Yeah. No. People have asked me to make like merchandise of some of the sayings that I say, like "one's mind need not boggle," or things like that. Maybe that could be one. When in Rune, I knew I was going to get one of you guys. I knew one of you guys was going to break, and I'm glad it was Matt because he always has his head down. And by the way, folks, for anybody watching, when Matt has his head down, he's usually writing notes or something. He is paying attention.
Yeah, a lot of 3 pages tonight.
You're not going to tell them that everybody that Matt's really listening to music on this episode?
What are you listening to tonight? We'll see like Matt get up for a bathroom break and he takes the headphones off and you just hear the faint sound of Metallica coming out of it.
It's an edgy dark cult rock group that sings all of its songs in black speech. That's what I'm listening to.
There is a heavy metal band called Gorgoroth.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah. I'm glad that my headphones have been hearing you guys.
I'm glad that my headphones have been hearing you guys as well.
But I just, is there anything to bring up out of the comments?
Honestly, the comments for the past little bit have mostly just been like, wow, this is great, just positive reinforcement there. So Jed here says all 3 commentators are bringing varied and wonderful insights from one another. Also thought your take there, your last thing that you said there, Matt, was great. Mr. Rippus brings up the cave allegory, which we know Tolkien hated allegory, but it is apt to what we were talking about. Let's see. By the way, Jed earlier was talking about the dwarves saying that they're more like of the line of Ishmael. That's Jed's thought there, at least. And Kits there says, I keep looking for lies, subterfuge, and seething corruption. I think that might have been in response to your question there, Sid, concerning the timing there.
I will say, as we got some time left here, I will say that, the audience doesn't know, John we're all in different states. No, we don't live close to each other at all.
No, nowhere near each other. I'm in Pennsylvania, Sid's in Florida, and you're in what, Washington?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we are very dissimilar in our lives. Our lives are not the same. But what's cool, we don't think exactly alike, in a lot of ways. But what's really cool about this and our friendship that we've developed with our crazy idea we had a couple of years ago or so, getting everybody together in this realm, in this world, is that we think we see the commonalities of what Tolkien is talking about, and by the fact that we've all got so much experience in reading this and studying this, myself since 1977, when my parents gave me the first actual published book of the Silmarillion when I was 11 years old. We all have had that same kind of story for how long we've been studying this, and we come together, and sometimes we have different opinions, but more often than not, and probably more often than we thought was going to happen, we find these threads of commonality, these centers of the Venn diagram that really show what Tolkien is talking about is truly timeless, truly applicable to our lives, and people who that you see right here in front of us can learn from, and all come to these very harmonious conclusions about things, which just speaks to the power of the truth. It speaks to the power of the author, the power of the works, and that's super powerful all by itself.
Oh, Mr. Rippus, we're going to be working on something like that coming around maybe in the summer. I was talking about like maybe having a guest on, because we're going to have Laurel on for a show in the summer when we perform Matt's play there. And I wanted to say something about what you just said. The differences are divine too. The differences are really, really good to celebrate, because if we all said the same things, it would be an echo chamber and it would be boring. Like I had, like two different thoughts about how we, early men came out of the darkness in Middle Earth. And Sid's like, well, I have a third. And I'm like, I welcome the third. There was a question that came through on Quora that was asked of both me and Sid. And we both answered it within a few hours of each other. And we had the absolute opposite answer. But that's okay, because it was a what-if scenario. And Sid's,
question was it?
your view was very valid. It was whether or not Luthien would be able to put Feanor to sleep in the same fashion that she did to Morgoth. And you said yes, and you had some very good reasons for saying yes, and I said no, and I had some very good reasons for saying no. But really, it's because it's an impossible situation that never would have happened that we can sit here and say that. And by the way, in case you're wondering, the reason I said no is because my view is that Morgoth kind of let that happen because he was looking at Luthien as an object of lust, whereas Feanor wouldn't have let his guard down in that fashion. So that was my thought. But I read your answer before I even wrote mine, and I thought it was very good. It was well reasoned, and we're allowed to have those sort of differences.
Drogulin and Karkaroff were put down for the count too. And I want to point out that not only did he let his guard down a little bit, but there's something else. Tolkien is clear about how many dragons and Balrogs were in his chambers that are also put to sleep. So I side with Sid on this in one way. That is, Luthien's song spell is...
It's very... Oh, I did say, this is the biggest display of power until the Akalabeth happens. But
I agree.
You have to also remember with the werewolves that they were very distracted by Beren.
Well, true.
So like specifically about whether she could do that to Feanor. Feanor is so single-minded. Pretty girl dancing, he doesn't care. He doesn't care. He's a guy who had no problem walking away from his wife because he wanted to chase his rocks instead.
Well, she's also the one who put Sauron in his place.
Well, that was Huan.
No, you're right, at her command,
Huan.
and he was the one that he had to treat with to get his life saved by. So she's so badass.
She absolutely is. I just think Feanor's different. That's like my thing. He's not like Morgoth or Sauron at all.
Sure.
Agree on that point.
Yeah.
You guys, everyone out there needs to hear one thing, a conversation that three of us had in the 2 months before we launched the first live stream, where Matt says, what I want to see is we all come from different places and
agree.
We're all going to agree.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't want that. I want us to come together and all agree to agree to disagree with respect, because Tolkien wants us to be sub-creators
100%.
That works from our own heart. And now here we are agreeing to disagree about agreeing to disagree.
Yeah. Hey, and I'm going to comment on that, but from the chat, Alice said, this is hilarious, going back to having a guest, because we want to have Laurel on at some point. Get a guest who knows nothing about Tolkien and get their perspective. As a joke, they're saying that, but that'd be funny.
Yes, but I want to say, John, I think we should think about having some 5-minute guests.
Yeah.
A lot sooner than next summer.
There is one person that I really want to get on the show. I'm not going to say who it is right now, but I'm working on it. But anyway,
I want to see more discussions like this in the end.
Yeah.
Here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We need to do this more often.
Agree with some UFC 200 Middle Earth UFC Middle Earth type questions. Like, here's the scenario. What do you think happens? Because I don't necessarily think any of us are really disagreeing totally, except, would they face each other? No. Are her strongs?
It's a complicated question, and I said my instinct was different from Sid's instinct. But what's interesting, what Sid just said, and I want to give a little bit more background, because Sid said, Matt really wanted us all to agree in the beginning, and then Sid said, I don't want that. And what's interesting is when we had our first disagreement, and how well that went, then Matt was like, yeah, you know what, I get it now. That's cool.
Well, I always did get it,
Yeah.
but what I was trying to say what I was really getting at for the sake of the audience was that Tolkien is the single author, and not all the time, but most of the time he's talking about one particular aspect of something, and when three different people who are different backgrounds can have that speak to them, and we all are able to, not because we're forcing each other to agree, but we all arrive there at the same time. That's what lends itself to some really interesting, calm power about really what's being communicated there.
Yeah,
it's not that we're agreeing with each other; it's that we're agreeing with Tolkien.
Yeah,
but
of course,
the
nature of studying the Legendarium is, despite the fact that I've got an entire bookshelf full of his work here, and another entire bookshelf full of his work behind the green screen, it's unfinished. And he changed his mind. Always will be. And he changed his mind about things so many times. And so unfortunately, the one thing that, if I could go back to a certain point in time, I would love to get a younger Christopher Tolkien and sort of sit him down and have him read Leaf by Neagle and have him understand how important it was to his father that other people finish his work. Because Christopher was so, and this is somewhat a good thing, but he took it too far. He was so protective of his father's work that he deified it, and he wouldn't let anybody touch it. And unfortunately, that led to this sort of thing where everybody sort of worships every word in the Silmarillion as being, the 100% truth, despite the fact that Tolkien, later in life had the idea that the Silmarillion was all BS anyway. And he said, yes, that's very destructive, but it's necessary.
Speaking of Tolkien's life...
I'm glad of what Christopher did in relation to those who create things to make money from the Legendarium.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't say anything about what we as readers are meant to do in our own Fea, our own soul, our own spirit, our own heart.
He had a very negative view of the Peter Jackson films, and I understand his thoughts perfectly. Sometimes I agree with what he says. A lot of times I don't, because I really like those films. But he said, this isn't the Lord of the Rings. And my thought has always been, that's Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings. It's not J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. They're two different things. They exist separately from each other, and one does not diminish the other.
Yeah, and this is my point about any adaptation from book to movie, or from play to opera or symphony to opera. Anytime you change genre, it's a new work of art. And I have tremendous admiration for Peter Jackson and the circumstances of what New Line could give him to do. And I don't know of another instance in the history of filmmaking where anyone could have come as close to Peter Jackson did to honoring the original work of an original author in a genre that isn't a money-making genre.
Until that time.
Yeah, it became a money-making genre because of Peter Jackson.
I agree with both of you.
Yeah. Well, no, my view is the movie was in a different genre than the book.
Oh, well, medium is is the word, I think.
Genre. Tolkien's genre is, I'm so tired of forgetting the word.
High fantasy, mythology, fairy story.
No, it's something higher than that. It's great literature. It's epic.
Yeah.
Tolkien's genre was epic, and the movie genre for Lord of the Rings was heroic fantasy.
Well, it was, but at the time in 1999, when it was funded and planned, I mean, I know what you're saying, but as far as its translation to the movies, it was 10 hours. And they filmed it all on site in 2 years, which at that point had never been done before. So it was epic in its own way, although the median
that's a different meaning of that. To me, that's a different meaning of epic than.
Well, I get it, because Sid's thinking like the Odyssey,
Yeah, I'm saying I think there have only been 5 epics written in 2,500 years in Western civilization, and Lord of the Rings is one of them. We're talking Iliad and Odyssey is one.
So wait, hold on. Are you looking forward to the Odyssey film that's coming out next year?
No.
Well,
you had to give me a bummer before I go to bed.
Very, very good director, though.
I've got to add on this Tolkien thing about his edits and Christopher Tolkien. His life, his work, his edits, it was never changing, never complete. He kept changing it, kept editing, kept building new worlds, all this. Tolkien, in the end, was granted gift of death.
Yeah.
He was given a time
Christopher, I'll give him so much credit for doing one thing. He could always admit when he made a mistake. And if you read through, especially Morgoth's Ring, he'll tell you exactly what parts of the Silmarillion he screwed up on.
I'd like to ask everybody out there before we go, would you guys like to hear more about On Fairy Stories and Leaf by Niggle, where Tolkien lays out the essence of what he's trying to do by writing it all?
You know what? I know they do, because you know what I did in one of the live streams that I did in the interim where I didn't have a computer? I read the entirety of Leaf by Niggle, and people ate it up.
Okay.
Speaking of that, I want to put a plug in for Quora. If you don't know what Quora is, you have to go there. It's a different format than Reddit. It's an experts format for reading. We have the best articles online on this anywhere in the world. I think our total readership for all the 9 of us together, for all the readers we've had, is around the 310 million mark. There's an article that I just recently wrote that if you go to Lore Master, if you go to John Sierra, if you go to Sid Kemp on Quora, you can take a look at our articles. It's not a bad idea for people who've seen this show to go to those core articles and take a look at those beauties. They are the best out there, and that's why we're in this group.
If you go to any profile,
that's how we met.
On the profile, it says search content, and you will get every, say
it's kind of
content.
It's a pretty bad search.
Everything. No, it's not that bad of a search. I find it does quite well.
Oh, it's terrible. I can't even get it to sort by newest. They're working on it, though.
There's sort problems,
yeah.
But I'm saying, boy, it's better than nothing. Which is
it is. We used to have nothing. I am friends with a bunch of the people that run Quora, and they are working on improving that aspect.
Oh, good. Good.
One of my biggest contact there just came off of maternity leave, so she's going to be answering a lot of questions about that kind of thing. As a matter of fact, I'm probably going to hit her up and be like, "Hey, that search feature,
Article. We were talking about articles.
If you convince her to talk to me, since I've written a program to search your own stuff. If you convince her to talk to me about what features would be good, I'd love to have a chat with her.
Let me just, before we end, let me address the question in chat about Valinor. Valinor was not necessarily built for the elves. So you understand that in the beginning, the planet, there was really only one really big landmass, which was called Middle-earth. And in the center of it was a big lake. And in the middle of that lake was an island called Almara, and that's where the Valar and the Maiar lived. And there was a big war between the Valar and Melkor, and it broke the land up. And the Undying Lands is a piece that floated off to the west. And when Morgoth, Melkor, put his soul into the world, it spread all throughout Middle-earth, but that was a part that evil had not yet touched. So when the Valar said, remember, there were no elves at this point, they said, we got to get out of here. There's too much evil here. They went to the west and they created what is called the Undying Lands. It was for them. Valinor is their country. That's why it's called Valinor. Later, they made another country there for the elves, just to the south of Valinor, called Eldamar. And they invited the elves to come and migrate to the Undying Lands. Not all of them went. But they didn't make that for the elves. They really made it for themselves.
But also, the whole continent is called Aman, the Undying Lands.
Yeah.
And the inland is Aman. The inland is Valinor. And
Valinor is just one country in the Undying Lands.
It's kind of like Valinor is more or less like Colorado and the Rockies, and what was it? Eldamar is
Texas,
and the East Coast also.
Yeah,
the elves live all along the coast.
Yeah, because they live in Erisea as well.
If you think of it briefly as North America as the Western continent.
But it's not literally North America, because that wasn't created to live. It's sort of shaped like a boomerang. If you look at the early maps, I have a wonderful, recommend this book, a wonderful atlas here.
But here's what's fun. In the earliest map, the entire world, including the oceans, are a ship on a vast sea beyond measure.
Yep.
And the whole world is like a Viking ship. And Valinor is at the head end of the ship, and Middle-earth is in the middle, and Rune and such would be more toward the tail.
He made a lot of really cool maps, and then his son would come and sort of improve upon them, and it's just a really cool process to see. Anyway, guys, that's our show for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did, because I really enjoyed it today, and I think Matt and Sid would say the same. You can find all of us on Quora. You can look me up, John Sierra, of course, Sid Kemp. Matt is out there. He's called Lore Master, and he's the only Lore Master now. We got rid of that other one. That other one turned out to be one of his students messing with him.
Well, I gave him a call on the Palantir, and he answered. That That was the worst thing he could
Well,
have
you
done.
should know not to mess with those Palantir, right? But schedule-wise...
Was his name Pippin?
Fool of a took! Let's,
It
schedule-wise...
was Ed.
Let's talk about this. So next week is the 11th. I'll be back here live to read more of the Two Towers to you guys. We'll be starting book 4 of The Lord of the Rings, which is the second half of the Two Towers, where we will be picking up with what happened with Frodo and Sam and Gollum, who gets introduced there. In 2 weeks on the 18th, we will not have a stream here. I'll be doing a Twitch stream, though, with the List Critics in 3 weeks. That is Christmas Day, December 25th, and I've decided that I'm going to do a special stream where I read J.R.R. Tolkien's Letters from Father Christmas, which is really, really cute. It's not that long. It'll probably be a shorter stream, but it'll be a really fun little Christmas time event for us. And then on, actually, New Year's Day, we'll be back here with the Council of Tolkien. And that's when we're going to do our movie special. So I'll be emailing you guys about that or whatever. And I'll come up with a format that we can follow and make it easy as I can for you guys to do this special that we're going to do. If you're watching me on Twitch, you guys know that I stream every single day. So, of course, tomorrow afternoon I will be live with Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D Remake. Saturday night, more of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Torn of the Golden Country. Sunday night, more of Mega Man Zero, and so on. You guys pretty much know the schedule. So, we're going to be signing off here, so let's come on over to the Grey Havens, where we will be sailing off. Oh, that's not the right one. We will be sailing off to the Undying Lands, or really just getting food and finally going to the bathroom and that sort of thing, right?
Doing our mortal thing.
Yeah, doing our the Undying kitchen. But okay, well, for those of you who are on, thank you, Jeddah. Yeah, if you subscribe to me, you'll get videos every Thursday. I'm sorry, every Wednesday. You get videos every Wednesday, and sometimes also on Fridays, depending on what I got going on, where I answer questions and everything. Thursdays are live stream nights. If you're watching on YouTube, the live will end momentarily. I do live stream regularly, yes. I live stream every single day, twitch.tv. I'm going to type it in. And, of course, here just about every Thursday. Not every Thursday, but just about every Thursday. That's my Twitch account. If you're into gaming, I also stream on there every day. It's a very different, much looser vibe. But if you come in there and you talk about Tolkien on there, I'm happy to talk about it on there as well. Because I do get people that wander over to Twitch and ask me questions there. And that's perfectly well. But if you're watching on YouTube, the live is going to end. If you're watching on Twitch, we're actually going to go ahead and raid somebody. Let me find somebody live who's going to raid. I would love to raid another Tolkien person. But usually the one that I follow there is Professor Corey Elson, but he's usually a Wednesday streamer. Yeah. Okay, we're going to raid a good friend of mine named Shiny Mudkip, who's playing Persona 3 Reloaded. So we're going to go ahead and raid her. Let's set that up there.
Night, everybody.
So, my Gavanen, everybody. We will see you next time. For those of you on Twitch, I'm going to give you a message that you could copy and paste as we head into Shiny Mudkip's stream. For those, yep. And for those of you on YouTube, we'll see you guys next week. Here we go.